I am sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor, looking out over the city skyline, holding a piece of paper that changed everything. It is yellowed now, creased from being folded and unfolded too many times over the past 5 years. A post-nuptial agreement. 5 years ago, Amanda, my wife from a wealthy family, handed me this document with one simple request: protect her family assets. Back then, I was just a software engineer making $85,000 a year, and she had inherited millions. I signed it without hesitation because I loved her. But now everything has flipped. She is completely broke, and I have built a company worth $25 million. And right now, she is standing outside my office door, tears streaming down her face, begging me to tear up that piece of paper. Before I tell you how we got here, I need to ask, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you have ever felt underestimated by someone who should have had your back hit, that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear how this plays out, because trust me, you will not see this ending coming. Now let me take you back to where the cracks first appeared. 7 years ago, I met Amanda at a tech networking event in Seattle. I was 25, working as a software engineer at a mid-sized company, pulling in a decent salary, but nothing spectacular. She was 27, a marketing director at her family's luxury fashion company, absolutely stunning and radiating confidence in a way that made everyone in the room turn and look. I was standing by the refreshment table, nursing a cheap white wine, and trying to work up the courage to actually network when she walked straight up to me. She smiled and asked what I did. When I told her I was a software engineer working on supply chain optimization, her eyes actually lit up. Not the polite interest most people faked at these events, but genuine curiosity. We talked for 2 hours straight about everything from machine learning applications to sustainable fashion manufacturing. She laughed at my terrible jokes. I made her think about problems in new ways. By the end of the night, she handed me her card and said we should get coffee. Those first few months of dating felt like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Amanda introduced me to a world I had only seen in movies. We ate at restaurants where the waiters knew her name and the wine list read like a novel. She insisted on paying, always waving away my protests with a laugh and saying money did not matter to her. What mattered, she said, was that I made her feel intellectually alive in a way no one else did. I believed her completely. When she looked at me, I felt like I was enough, exactly as I was. We got married 1.5 years later at a beautiful vineyard in Napa Valley. The wedding cost $150,000, every penny paid by her family. I tried to contribute, but her mother gently suggested I save my money for our future instead. Her parents were polite to me, always smiling, but I caught the subtle judgments. Her mother asked about my career trajectory with a tone that suggested she was already calculating the answer. Her father mentioned twice that software engineering was stable work, then paused meaningfully as if waiting for me to acknowledge it was not impressive work. The first 2 years of marriage were comfortable in ways I had never experienced. We lived in a penthouse her family had purchased for us, a stunning 3-bedroom in downtown Seattle, worth $2.3 million. Amanda continued working at the family company while I stayed at my engineering job. We traveled to Europe every summer, ate at Michelin-starred restaurants, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. But small moments started adding up. When I suggested we split the cost of a vacation, Amanda laughed and said good thing we had her trust fund. When I talked about wanting to contribute more financially to our household, she patted my hand and told me not to worry about it. She had it covered. The words were kind, but something in her tone made me feel small, like I was a child being told the adults would handle the real responsibilities. I started a side project around that time, something I kept quiet about. Late at night, after Amanda went to sleep, I would work on an app I had been dreaming about for years, a logistics management platform for small and medium-sized businesses. The existing solutions were either too expensive or too complicated for most companies. I saw a gap in the market, and I wanted to fill it. I used my own savings, hired a freelance developer from Ukraine, and coded most of it myself. Amanda never asked what I was doing during those late nights. I think she assumed I was just working overtime at my day job. Then came month 25 of our marriage, the night that changed everything. Amanda came home with a man I had never met before. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She introduced him as Gregory Hartman, her family's attorney. My stomach dropped before she even opened her mouth. She set a thick document on our dining room table and looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. Apologetic maybe, but also determined. She explained that her father was restructuring the family assets and wanted to protect the trust fund. It was just a formality, she said. Nothing would change between us. But they needed me to sign a post-nuptial agreement. I picked up the document with shaking hands and read through it. The language was dense and legal, but the meaning was crystal clear. Everything Amanda had brought into the marriage and everything she would inherit stayed hers. If we ever divorced, I walked away with nothing from her side. I could only keep what I had earned myself. I looked up at her, and I am not proud to say my voice cracked when I spoke. I asked if she really thought I had married her for money. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Of course not, she said. But her father was just being careful. Surely I understood. It was just a piece of paper. It did not change anything about us. The lawyer cleared his throat and explained in a cold professional tone that this was standard practice for families of means. He said it like I should feel grateful they were even explaining it to me. I did not sleep that night. I lay next to Amanda, listening to her breathe, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. Every insecurity I had ever felt about our relationship came rushing back. Was I really just her pet project? Her safe, stable choice? The guy who would never be quite good enough for her world. But the next morning, when she woke up and smiled at me with that same warm smile I had fallen in love with, I made my decision. I signed the Post-Nup. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to prove something. I wanted to prove I did not need her money. I wanted to prove I had married her for love, not for what her family could provide. So I picked up the pen and signed my name, pressing so hard the ink almost bled through the paper. What I did not realize was that I had just signed away my dignity. The months after signing that Post-Nup, Amanda changed in ways so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. But I was not imagining anything. She started making all our financial decisions alone. When I asked about contributing to our investment portfolio, she smiled and said she would handle it. I should just focus on my job. When I mentioned my idea about the logistics app, she actually laughed. She called it cute, but pointed out that most startups failed. Why would I risk a stable career for something that probably would not work out? I stopped mentioning it. Instead, I poured myself into building it in secret. While Amanda slept, I coded. While she went out with her trust fund friends to charity galas and wine tastings, I debugged and tested and refined. I used every spare dollar from my $85,000 salary. I skipped lunches and made coffee at home. I hired contractors only when absolutely necessary and taught myself everything else. I called my app Logiflow, and for 18 months it was just me and a dream no one knew about. Then something incredible happened. Small businesses started signing up. Not hundreds at first, just a few dozen. But they loved it. They told their friends. Within 2 years, I had 200 clients and was bringing in $1.2 million in annual revenue. I was profitable. I was actually building something real. And Amanda had no idea. She was too busy with her own ventures, which were falling apart in slow motion. A year after the Post-Nup, she quit the family company to open her own boutique. She wanted to pursue her passion, she said. Her father gave her $500,000 to get started. The boutique was beautiful, all-exposed brick and carefully curated inventory, but the clothes were too expensive and too niche. She treated it like a hobby closing whenever she wanted to travel, failing to track inventory or manage cash flow properly. It lasted 18 months before she shut the doors, having lost over $300,000. Then came the cryptocurrency scheme. A friend of a friend, someone who called himself a financial advisor but was really just a con artist with a good suit, convinced her to invest $800,000 in some crypto project that promised revolutionary returns. I tried to warn her. I actually sat her down and explained the red flags, but she waved me off. She knew what she was doing, she said. I should stick to coding and let her handle investments. 6 months later, the whole thing collapsed. She lost nearly everything she had put in. By year 5 of our marriage, Amanda had burned through most of her trust fund. She had about $1.5 million left, but her lifestyle had not changed at all. She still shopped at designer stores, dropping $15,000 on a single Hermes bag. She still went to the spa every week, $500 a session. She still drove her Porsche Cayenne with its $1,800 monthly payment. Meanwhile, I was working 2 full-time jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. My company was exploding. I had scaled to 500 clients. Revenue hit $8 million annually. I had hired a small team and rented actual office space. But I still had not told Amanda. Part of me was waiting for the right moment. Part of me was afraid she would find some way to diminish it. And part of me, the part I am not proud of, wanted to see how long it would take her to notice that her husband was building an empire right under her nose. Our marriage had become a ghost. We lived in the same penthouse but occupied different worlds. She went out with friends most nights while I worked. Our sex life had dwindled to almost nothing, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, mechanical and joyless. She started drinking more 2 or 3 bottles of wine a week. I would hear her on the phone with her mother, her voice tight with stress, talking about money problems. One night she came home drunk and collapsed on the couch next to me. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she felt like a failure. The boutique had failed. Her investments had failed. She said she was not good at anything. I almost told her about Logiflow right then. I wanted to comfort her, but before I could say anything, she passed out. The next morning she did not remember. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. Either way, we went back to our separate lives. I tried to talk about our marriage once. I asked if she was happy. She immediately got defensive and asked if I was seeing someone. I said no, but we were not really together anymore, were we? She told me not to be dramatic. Every marriage had rough patches. We were fine, we were not fine. We were 2 strangers sharing an address. Then came the night everything exploded. I had just received an acquisition offer for Logiflow. A major tech company wanted to buy it for $25 million. I turned them down because I wanted to keep building, but the offer validated everything. My company was worth something real. I was worth something real. I decided to tell Amanda. I do not know what I expected. Maybe I wanted her to be proud. Maybe I wanted to finally share this part of my life with her. Maybe I just wanted to see her reaction. I waited until after dinner. She was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging me, when I said I needed to tell her something important. I had been building a company for the past few years. It was doing really well. She looked up, mildly interested. A company? How well enough that someone just offered $25 million for it. Her face transformed. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open, and for the first time in months, she actually looked at me like I was there. She stood up so fast, her chair almost fell over. She started talking rapidly, asking why I had not told her, saying this changed everything we needed to celebrate. But every word out of her mouth was about what we could do with the money. We could buy a house in Malibu. We could get a yacht. We could finally travel first class everywhere. She kept saying, we. She never once asked about the company itself, never asked what it did or how I built it or why it mattered to me. Just the money, just what she could get from it. Something cold settled in my chest. I interrupted her and said, actually the Post-Nup meant this was my asset, not marital property. She froze. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She stammered that we were married, that was our money. No, wait, my money, but surely I was not going to be like that about it. Right? The air in the room went cold. I looked at my wife and realized I was looking at a stranger. A stranger who had made me sign away my dignity and then spent 5 years treating me like I was not quite good enough. A stranger who only cared about me now that I had something she wanted. That night I saw Amanda clearly for the first time in 7 years, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The 3 weeks after that conversation were surreal. Amanda went through stages like she was working from some kind of manipulation playbook. Week 1, she tried the soft approach. Suddenly, she was the loving wife she had not been in years. She cooked dinner for the first time in forever, actually standing in our kitchen and attempting to make pasta carbonara from a recipe on her phone. It was terrible, but she served it with candlelight and wine and kept touching my arm, laughing at things I said that were not jokes. At night, she would press against me in bed, trying to initiate intimacy. But every touch felt calculated, performative. I could not do it. I made gentle excuses and felt her frustration building. Week 2, when soft did not work, she shifted to bargaining. She started rewriting history out loud as if saying things would make them true. She would mention how she had always supported my career. I would remember her laughing at my startup idea. She would talk about how we were partners and what was mine was ours. I would remember the Post-Nup sitting in my desk drawer. She would say she had always believed in me. I would remember 5 years of subtle dismissals and condescension. One morning over coffee, she looked at me with desperate eyes and said she had made some bad investments, but she had always planned to share everything with her. It was such an obvious lie that I did not even bother responding. Week 3, reality set in. Amanda finally looked at her bank accounts, really looked at them, and I watched her face crumble. She had $380,000 left. That sounds like a lot until you factor in her spending habits. The Porsche payment was $1,800 a month. The penthouse HOA fees were $3,200 monthly. She had $45,000 in credit card debt from shopping sprees she could not actually afford. She had no real income, just occasional consulting work for friends that brought in maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a month if she was lucky. For the first time in her life, Amanda was facing financial reality, and she was terrified. One night she came home, poured herself a large glass of wine, then another, then another. By 10 p.m. she was drunk and crying on the couch. She admitted she was running out of money. She had not wanted to tell me. She felt like such a failure. I sat across from her and said quietly that I knew. I had noticed. She looked at me with smeared makeup and asked if I could help her. Just for now. Just until she figured things out. I felt a flicker of compassion. Despite everything, we had been married for 7 years. So I paid some of her bills. But I also told her we needed to talk seriously about our situation. About us. She interpreted that as me forgiving her, as things going back to normal. She hugged me and thanked me and said she knew we could work through anything. She had no idea what was coming. A week later, Amanda met with a divorce attorney without telling me. I only found out later through my own lawyer. Her attorney, a woman named Patricia Summers with a reputation for being aggressive, reviewed the Post-Nup and told Amanda what she did not want to hear. It was airtight. Amanda would not get any of my company. The best they could do was try to argue I had built it using marital time and resources, which might get her some small compensation. When Amanda came home that night, she was different, harder, desperate. She sat me down and dropped a bomb. She said she thought we should tear up the Post-Nup. I just stared at her. What she said, it was dividing us. It had been a mistake. We should start fresh as equal partners. I let the silence stretch out before I responded. I said, "You mean now that I have money and you do not?" She started crying, said that was not fair, that she loved me, that money did not matter to her. I asked her, if money does not matter, then why does the Post-Nup bother you? She had no answer. Over the next week, Amanda began a campaign to rewrite history with everyone we knew. She told her friends and family that she had always believed in me, that she had supported my business. My best friend Marcus, who had known me since college and had warned me the Post-Nup was a bad sign, texted me asking if Amanda had really helped fund my startup. I told him the truth. She had not given me a single dollar or a single word of encouragement. I realized Amanda was building a narrative. If she could convince enough people that she had contributed to my success, maybe she could use that in court. Maybe she could argue she deserved part of what I had built. That was when I stopped being passive. That was when I took control. I called a lawyer of my own, a sharp, experienced attorney named David Nguyen, who had built a reputation for protecting entrepreneurs in divorces. We met in his office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I brought the Post-Nup, my bank statements, my company incorporation documents, everything. David read through it all carefully, then looked up and smiled. He said the Post-Nup was completely valid. My company was my separate property, period. Amanda could not touch it, but he warned me she would try to make things messy. I told him to prepare for that. I was done. I spent the next week documenting everything. I pulled bank statements proving I had used only my own salary to bootstrap Logiflow. I gathered time-stamped code commits showing I had worked on the company entirely outside of normal business hours, never using my employer's resources. I collected emails between me and my co-founders and investors. Amanda's name did not appear once. I found the lease for my office space signed 2 years earlier with only my name on it. I built an airtight case. Then I prepared myself for the hardest conversation of my life. 3 nights later, I came home and found Amanda in the living room looking at real estate listings on her laptop. Luxury homes in Malibu, penthouses in Manhattan, places that cost millions of dollars she did not have, but somehow thought she would. I sat down across from her and said we needed to talk. She looked up hopeful. She probably thought I was going to tell her I would forget the Post-Nup, that we could share everything. Instead, I told her I had been thinking a lot about what she had said regarding the Post-Nup. She leaned forward. And I said I was not tearing it up, and I thought we both knew this marriage was over. The color drained from her face. What, no? We could fix this. I asked her what exactly we would fix. I said she only wanted to fix things now because her money was gone. When she had it, I had not been good enough. She had made me sign that paper to protect her assets. Now she wanted to rewrite history because the tables had turned. She started crying, that manipulative kind of crying designed to make me feel guilty. She said that was not true, that her father had pressured her, that she had been scared. I stayed calm. I said maybe that was true. But she had not fought for us then. She had not defended me to her family. She had let them treat me like I was beneath them. And honestly, she had treated me that way too. She grabbed my hands and begged. She said she would change. She would be better. I pulled my hands away and said it was too late. I was filing for divorce. Amanda's face twisted through shock, denial, anger. She screamed that I would regret this. She threatened to take me to court and make me pay. She said her lawyer would destroy me. I stood up, looked down at her, and said quietly that she should do whatever she needed to do. The Post-Nup was legal. My company was mine. This was over. I walked to the guest room, packed a bag, and left. As I closed the door behind me, I took my first deep breath in 5 years. The next 6 months were hell, but not in the way Amanda expected. She did hire Patricia Summers, and they threw everything at me they could think of. They claimed emotional abuse, dismissed immediately for lack of evidence. They claimed Amanda had contributed intellectually to my company, but they could not provide a single email, text, or witness to support it. They tried to argue that marital time equaled compensation, but the judge read the Post-Nup and shut that down fast. It cost Amanda $50,000 in legal fees she could not afford. It cost me $30,000. But I had prepared well-stayed factual in depositions and never lost my temper. The final settlement was clean. Amanda kept the penthouse, which was in her name, and what was left of her trust fund. I kept my company and my personal savings. No alimony, because we were both legally capable of supporting ourselves. A complete legal divorce. We signed the papers at the courthouse on a cold morning in March. We did not speak. As we stood up to leave, she looked at me one last time and said she hoped I was happy. I looked back at her and said I would be. We walked out different doors and never saw each other again. The 6 months after my divorce were strange. I moved into a smaller apartment downtown, a one-bedroom place I chose myself for $2,500 a month. After years of living in a penthouse, I had never paid for the modest space felt like freedom. It was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish in the cabinet, every decision about what went on the walls. Mine. The first few weeks were lonely in a way I had not expected. Not because I missed Amanda. I had stopped missing her long before we divorced. But I was mourning something else. The version of myself who had believed our marriage could work. The optimistic 25-year-old who thought love was enough. I was grieving 7 years I could not get back. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Lynn, who specialized in helping people process failed relationships. In our third session, she asked me what hurt most about the divorce. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I said I was not in pain because the relationship ended. I was in pain because I had finally realized it had never been what I thought it was. She nodded and said sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting that we built our lives on a foundation that was never solid. That landed hard, but it also freed something in me. I threw myself back into my company with a clarity I had not had in years. Without the distraction of a failing marriage, without the constant low-level stress of feeling inadequate, I could focus completely. Logiflow grew from $8 million to $45 million in valuation within 18 months. We hit 150 employees. I hired a CEO to handle day-to-day operations and took the role of chairman, which gave me more flexibility and work-life balance. And I rediscovered parts of myself I had buried. I started hiking every weekend in the Cascade Mountains, something I had loved in college but had given up during my marriage. I bought a camera and taught myself photography. I joined an entrepreneur mastermind group and started mentoring young founders, helping them avoid the mistakes I had made. I felt purposeful in a way I had not in years. Not because I was proving anything to anyone, but because I genuinely enjoyed building things and helping others build things too. I dated casually, nothing serious. I was not ready to rush into another relationship. I needed time to figure out who I was outside of being Amanda's husband. Then I met Jade. It was at a hiking meetup group I had joined. She was 31, worked as a director for a nonprofit, focused on environmental education, and had a laugh that sounded like sunlight. We ended up hiking the same trail and fell into easy conversation about mountain ecosystems and the best local coffee shops. Our first actual date was at a small cafe near Green Lake. No expensive restaurants, no wine lists that read like novels. Just good coffee and comfortable conversation. She asked about my company, but she seemed more interested in why I cared about logistics and supply chain problems than in how much money I made. She told me about her work teaching kids about sustainability, and her eyes lit up in a way that reminded me of who I used to be before cynicism set in. Things developed slowly, naturally. We hiked together on weekends. We cooked dinner at each other's apartments. We talked about books and politics and what we wanted our lives to look like in 10 years. She was financially independent, driven by passion rather than profit, and completely comfortable in her own skin. She was everything Amanda had pretended to be. I did not tell her about Amanda or the divorce for the first 2 months. When I finally did sitting on a mountain overlook watching the sunset, she listened quietly and then said something I will never forget. She said it sounded like I had learned exactly who I was by discovering who I was not. She said, "That made me more interesting, not less. I fell for her slowly the way you fall asleep. One moment you are awake, and the next you realize you are somewhere completely different, somewhere safe." I got an update about Amanda around that time through a mutual acquaintance. She had sold the penthouse but had timed it badly during a market dip. She only got $1.9 million for it after fees and paying off the remaining mortgage, and most of that went to clearing her debts. She moved back in with her parents in Portland. She was working as a marketing consultant but could not maintain steady clients and was only making $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Her parents were disappointed, the acquaintance said. They were having to support her financially. The acquaintance clearly expected me to gloat or feel vindicated, but I just felt tired and a little sad. Not for Amanda specifically, but for both of us, for all the time we had wasted. I did receive one text from Amanda about a year after our divorce. It came late at night and was clearly sent while drunk. She said she was sorry for everything, that I had deserved better, that she hoped I was happy. I read it several times. Then I wrote back something simple. I said I hoped she found what she was looking for and to take care. Then I blocked her number. Not out of anger, out of necessity. We both needed to move forward, and we could not do that while looking back. Looking back now, sitting in my office, holding that old Post-Nup, I realized something that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. That document was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it protected my money, but because it forced me to see my marriage clearly. It taught me that my worth was not tied to anyone else's validation. It made me build something that was truly mine, something no one could diminish or take away. My therapist once told me that sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that set you free. I did not believe her then, but I believe her now. If Amanda had not asked for that Post-Nup, I might have stayed in that marriage for another 10 years, always feeling like I was not quite enough. I might never have built Logiflow. I might never have learned that I did not need anyone's permission to be successful or happy or whole. The Post-Nup was her protection, but it became my liberation. I do not spend my time being bitter or angry anymore. I have donated $2 million to create scholarships for first-generation college students who want to study engineering. I volunteer with that mastermind group helping young entrepreneurs avoid predatory investors and bad partnerships. I am building something meaningful, not just profitable. And I have learned to be careful about who I let into my life, not out of cynicism, but out of wisdom. I know my boundaries now. I know my worth. And I refuse to compromise either. My phone buzzes with a text from Jade. She wants to know if I am free to hike this Saturday. She found a new trail she thinks I will love. I smile and text back immediately. Absolutely. I look out the window at the city, the sun setting behind the skyline painting, everything in shades of gold and amber. Then I pick up that old Post-Nup one more time. I do not throw it away. It is a reminder of where I have been and how far I have come. But I do not display it either. That would mean I was still dwelling there. Instead, I fold it carefully and place it in the bottom drawer of my desk. A piece of history, a lesson learned, a closed chapter. I lean back in my chair and realize I am smiling, not because of revenge or vindication or proving anyone wrong, but because I am genuinely, completely at peace. I used to think that Post-Nup took something from me, but really it gave me everything I needed, the freedom to become who I was meant to be without asking for permission or approval from anyone. And you know what? I would not change a single thing. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you only for life to prove them wrong? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences matter. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more real stories about resilience and growth. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that setbacks can become setups for something better. Take care of yourself, respect your worth, and never let anyone make you feel small. Until next time.